crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with another one sheet wonder tutorial. I'm using a 6x6 piece of paper and showing you how to cut it such that you will make 2 cards with no scraps. If you want to use up some 12x12 paper, this technique will still work. It's just that you would do it 4 times with 1 sheet of paper and you'll get 8 cards. That's kind of why I chose to go with that size. I don't have a lot of 12x12 paper, but I know there are people looking to use both sizes of paper, and I thought if I did the 6x6, then it would serve both audiences, essentially. You can download all the measurements and the sketch and all that information as a PDF over on my blog, and that will be linked in the video description below, so you don't have to pay attention to the specific measurements, although I'll talk briefly about them. And as I said, it's a PDF, so you can put it in a card sketch binder if that's what you have. I take a 6x6 piece of paper for this sketch and cut it to 3x6. Then I cut that in half so I have 2 3x3 squares. With my remaining 3x6, I cut off a 1/2 inch so that I have 3 by 1/2. Then I have a 5 by 3 inch piece left, which I cut in half long ways, so that's 1.5 by 5. And you can see all of the pieces there. I am going to be mixing it up. These are single-sided papers, and so I'm going to cut 2 sheets and get 4 cards so that I can mix the patterns. But I think this design will still look good if you were to use only one pattern, if you're not going to use double-sided paper. I like double-sided paper, but not every paper in my collection is. So I'm just trying to mix it up because some of my old sketches or my previous sketches, I have shown double-sided paper only. I'm then going to cut cardstock mats. In the PDF, it shows you the sketch, like how I have chosen to assemble these pieces. You could, of course, mix it up, but this is just my suggestion. And I'm always going to use a mat, and this type is a 1/4 inch mat, which is my preferred mat size. And so all of those pieces that I cut previously, I'm going to cut a piece of gray cardstock in this instance that is 1/4 inch bigger on both sides. Then I will glue them all down so that I can mix and match my pieces. When I am making a bunch of cards at once, like here, I actually cut enough for 8 cards. I like to actually put out a bunch of pieces at one time and add the adhesive to all of them. As you can see, that goes a lot faster than if you were to put all of the tape on one and then place it down and then put another one out, just kind of lining them all up. If you really are in mass production mode, I think that this sketch in particular would work well for if you want to make a lot of cards, because there's not a lot of pieces. There's just the 3 pieces. Whereas in some of my other sketches, like my last one sheet wonder that I shared has like 7 pieces and everything's a lot smaller. So it's going to, of course, take up more time. There, I'm just showing you that you can mix up the patterns in a bunch of different ways. If you have bolder patterns, then it might be nice to pair one bold pattern with one simpler pattern. I do tend to buy simpler pattern paper for the ones where I'm not going to use like the whole sheet at once or the whole pad at once. I do plenty of tutorials where I use an entire pad of 6x6 paper. But if I know that that's not my intention with it, that I just want it for card making in general, I'm going to tend towards simpler patterns. And so that's what this one was. All right, I'm going to use, to finish off my card, a honeybee hugs die that layers, and I cut one layer from the shadow layer from gray cardstock, and then I cut the top hugs die cut from white cardstock. And I'm trying to keep this card not quite monochromatic because there's blues and grays and white, but like very simple color palette. I don't want to add any additional colors, and so I did the gray and white there. I think you could mix it up and do the white in the back if you prefer. Then I am going to stamp this from these elephants from the Heffy Doodle Elephant of Surprise stamp set. I stamped 2 on white cardstock and 1 on gray cardstock because I'm going to show you 2 ways of doing the elephant. Here is my Copic coloring. I'm using the ends, but I think the cool grays would work well, or the warm grays. The paper that I'm using is a little more cool, so that's why I went with the ends, and I think the C's would do it as well. I added a tiny line of shadow in the sort of drop shadows of his body, like his hand would cast a shadow back onto his ears, or where his arm meets his body, there's going to be a shadow. Just really, really simple shadows, really, really simple coloring, because this is not like an elaborate scene. Then I take the next darkest marker, the N3, and I go just a tiny bit more out, but I save most of my coloring space. I would try to say at least 75% of the space I try to reserve for my lightest marker. And those deeper, smaller shadows is a look that I particularly like. However, if you're not interested in doing coloring, whether it be with different alcohol markers or colored pencils, etc., you could stamp this on gray cardstock like I did, and I trimmed it out. Then I'm going to mount it on one of the other die cut elements. So I'll show you that in a second, but here I'm gluing down my elements. The top elements are going to be overhanging that cardstock on the left. And so just to make things a little smoother, I'm taking a piece of scrap cardstock and I'm covering the other side of the paper with it, or the other side of the card base with it, just so that everything lays a little bit more even and flat. Whereas if I were to glue it directly to the card base, it would kind of bump up a little bit on the left side. I hope that makes sense. This is certainly not necessary, and plenty of times I do it without this extra bit of cardstock, but it does create a little bit more of a clean finished look. Okay, so then I have my hugs die. So I glued the hugs onto the gray shadow. I fussy cut out the elephant that I stamped on gray, and I die cut out an elephant stamped on white, which will allow me to create a layer so that my elephant will still have a white border. I am using Barely Arts glue for a lot of my adhering. I find that it doesn't wrinkle my paper and it holds really strongly. It's easy to come by and ships in the winter and all that. It's just a really good liquid glue I've been happy with. So there's my two different elephant alternatives, one for if you like coloring and one if that is not so much your thing or you need to be faster. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I will leave you links to the products that I used in the video description below. And I thank you so much for taking this time. Have an awesome day. Bye.